The first person I'd like to introduce, I met her at the Gulf Coast Water Conservation Symposium in Houston, and I was just astounded at her upbeat and just really great presentation she made, because she's got such energy. Kathleen Jackson has a pretty varied background in agriculture, environment, industrial. She's a professional engineer, registered professional engineer. She served she worked for a major oil company. She helped her husband in agricultural businesses and rice farming. She's been a past member of the Lower Neches Valley Authority Board of Directors, Texas Water Conservation Association, and she is also a former member of the Beaumont chapter of the Commerce, Minority Business and Development Partnership, the Beaumont Independent School District Educational Improvement and Partnership Advisory. She also, and the list is incredibly long, so I'm not going to read all of it, but she also served as past president of Lamar University, Lamar Institute of Technology Foundation. She's a standing member of Virginia League of Beaumont, a member of the Texas Farm Bureau, past president of the American Cancer Society of North Jefferson County, and a past board member of the Junior Achievement of the Golden Triangle. She has a chemical engineering, bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from North Carolina State University. She has 3 children, all 6th-generation Texans. They all reside and work in Texas. Please join me in welcoming Kathleen Jackson.
Pleasure to be here this morning. Thanks so much for coming out. And of course, my objective in coming from Austin is not only to hopefully impart a little bit of information that maybe you don't already know, but also to gather your thoughts and ideas. So I would encourage you, I'll be here all day. If you have an idea that you'd like to kind of bounce off or that you can share with me, I would be eternally grateful to have some time to spend with you. Starting off, I did want to kind of give a couple of shout outs. First of all, I'm from Beaumont. My home is in Beaumont, so after here, I head over to check on the dog and the kids before I go back to Austin. But my senator is also Brandon Creighton, and I feel like that you need to know what a wonderful job he is doing in Austin, how engaged he is in water issues, and how valued he is, not just to me, but to our other board members in terms of being able to reach out to him, talk with him about issues. He's very engaged in groundwater, also surface water, and he's thinking in terms of the long term. And I got to tell you, I'm just so proud of him, and I'm so grateful that he's there to be a resource for us. Second big shout out is to the community, and most recently you received the very prestigious Blue Legacy Award for Excellence in Water Conservation. Receiving the award is C.E. Williams, who is the chair of the Governor's Water Conservation Advisory Committee. It's a statewide organization, and of course Carol Baker is there. This was done at the Capitol, and I know Chairman Kepler attended and had some kind words to say. The overall program, I guess that's in the brochure, is something that you can look at in more detail. But when I visited with the folks about the program, there were some things that kind of hit me that I thought were unique, that made it successful, and that will make it a model for others around the state to do. Not only did you put the information out, but you sent people out to impart that information and to make it something that was very personal. So you had ambassadors that were patrolling the neighborhoods. And then it was an incentive program. We know that the key to moving forward in water conservation, whether it is residential or whether it's industrial, is going to be, or it's agriculture, is going to be technology. It's a big part of it. So having a rebate program that encourages folks to go out and get that technology is so important. And then I think for me as an engineer, measuring your success, oftentimes we talk about water conservation and we talk about underwater strategies, but we need to know how much are we filling that bucket? How much impact are we making strategy-wise so that we're developing future water supplies? And so, the bottom line message is a 31% savings in residential water usage
which equates to 1.7 billion to be gallons of water. So awesome job. Congratulations. I think we should give them another hand. Exciting times in Texas and lots of focus on water, many different reasons. One, of course, Texas has long been in drought. This is nothing, I don't think it's new for Texans. Of course, here, you know, in southeast Texas, we're blessed with an abundant rainfall, but there are other parts of Texas that continue to be very dry. And, you know, the real message here is that it's not just the climate, but it tremendously impacts water supply, particularly for reservoirs. After the drought of the 50s, which is our drought of record, is how we measure, and we do our water planning based on making sure that we're prepared to be able to make it through another drought of record like we had in the 50s. But after the 50s, the work effort moving forward was basically to build reservoirs, not just for water supply, but also for power generation and for flood control. But what we've seen in terms of monitoring these reservoirs is there are huge evaporative losses. And of course there are limitations because you have to depend on it to rain to fill the reservoirs back up. Just to give you kind of like back of the envelope feel on what those evaporative losses are and how they impact the community. In Wichita Falls, their evaporative losses are 3 times what the community's consumptions are. So huge issues associated with drought. And of course, the other thing that's going on in Texas is this is very much a good thing and lots of growth, you know, right here, you know, in Woodlands and in Houston and all along the Texas Gulf Coast, as people are coming to Texas. And depending on who you talk to, there are 1,000 to 1,200 people coming every day, and nobody's bringing any water. So challenges with drought, challenges with future growth, and so how are we going to meet these challenges? And I feel like as leaders in the community, it's important to kind of know what is going on around Texas. I mean, what are Texans looking at in terms of moving forward with different water strategies? And to me, what's so exciting is that, you know, back after the drought of the 50s, the primary thing that folks thought about were reservoirs. That's what we went out and built. But now there are many other strategies that communities are considering. The farmers will tell you that there is an ocean of water underneath Texas. So there's fresh water, but there's also brackish water. So for years, I mean, it was kind of like brackish water, you know, not much value, it's salty, it's deep, you've got to, you know, expensive to go after it. And there wasn't a whole lot of attention to it. But now that we're looking across Texas and we're gathering data on, you know, where the brackish aquifers are, and the technology is evolving to be able to remove the salt from the water and make it so that it is a you know, cost-effective drinking water supply. Lots of work on brackish desal, and certainly a very promising strategy and something that's already being used across Texas. Third on the list, but probably should be top of the list, is water conservation. If you look at where is Texas going to get its future water supplies, almost a third will come from water conservation and then reuse. An example of an effective reuse project that's been put in, again, I'm going to call out Wichita Falls, in extreme drought situation. I mean, their reservoirs were down to the 26% level, and so they literally took a reverse osmosis plant that had been taking salty water from the Red River, and they retooled it, and they put their wastewater discharge through this retooled reverse osmosis plant, and they're literally taking the discharge from their municipal wastewater treatment plant and directly putting it back in to the front end of their water supply. And then their long-term plans is to promote and move forward with an indirect reuse, where they'll treat it and go into Lake Airhead and then bring it back to the community. So I think you'll see more and more reuse projects that will be, you know, again, an effective part of the strategy and something that communities will be moving forward. We talked about evaporative losses, and one of the things that is kind of popping out, in fact, it's being done in San Antonio, is aquifer storage and recovery. If you can kind of picture, if you will, kind of upside down base underneath the ground, that is what aquifer storage and recovery pretty much looks like. If you look at it from just ground level, it looks like a big field, and oftentimes there are still farmers that are grazing their cows, but they're using, if they have the right geology, to be able to take the water. In the instance of San Antonio, they're actually treating brackish water and then re-injecting it to the aquifer if they don't need it, so they'll have it for future water supplies. And of course, you know, the big advantage there is you don't have the evaporative losses. And then kind of like the last thing on the list is seawater desal. And I always think it's important for communities to kind of know that this is evolving technology. It's been around for years, but it's like the stars are lining up in Texas because in part of the Eagle Ford shale play and the fact that we have an abundant supply of clean burning natural gas, which has drawn manufacturing investment along the coast. So depending on who you talk to, $20 billion in the Corpus Christi area, and manufacturing facilities that are coming want to make sure that they have a reliable supply of drinking water for their processing facilities. So for them, looking out and saying, seawater desal, that provides me a very reliable supply. For many of them, the cost of water for processing is kind of lost in the roundup. So M&G, for example, which is a new plastics plant that's being built in Corpus Christi, is going to build their own 7 million gallon a day desal plant. They're going to take 2 million gallons a day and recycle it within their own facility in addition to the 7 million gallons a day. And then, of course, the two big costs associated with desal are what do you do with the brine concentrate, and then how do you generate, you know, a power supply that's cost effective enough to make it economically viable. The plastics plant and many other manufacturing facilities are steam sinks. They utilize steam. So they're pairing this up and gathering the synergies of something called cogeneration, which is a very cost-effective way of generating power. And then they're taking the brine concentrate and literally, you know, putting it back either into the ship channel, or back into the ocean, and then with studies and work with TCQ to make sure that it's not impacting the environment. So it's a viable plan that's moving forward. My children tell me that I'm so old that I remember the first calculator, which I did. I was a junior in college. Very first calculator was $500, which is exactly a semester's tuition to North Carolina State. And I remember asking, my fellow students, I said, why would you go out and make this investment? And he said, because it makes me so much more competitive. And I mean, that's what seawater desal is with these manufacturing facilities, is that it makes them so much more competitive. And then we all know that the calculator that was $500 then, I mean, literally people are giving away now. And I think that's what you'll see with technology as it evolves, and just getting out this very first plant that we have, the technical resources and the leadership of manufacturing facilities being able to implement and get that first plant up. I think you'll see others follow. So I think great promise in seawater desal as well as these other facilities. So the backbone of what we do at the Water Development Board is in our planning activities, and Texas is unique because if you look at other parts of the country, they have maybe a group like the Water Development Board. They do all their studies and then they kind of like, send it out to the rest of the state. In Texas, nobody tells Texans what to do. Nobody tells Texans what to do, so it's a bottom-up process. So we have 16 regional water planning groups, and they have folks that work with them that are mandated to have representation from small cities, from rural areas, from big cities, from agriculture, manufacturing, from all of the various different sectors and interests. They all come together and they basically say, what do we have today? What do we feel like we're going to need tomorrow to meet not only our challenges, but also future opportunities? And what are the strategies to get there? We take all of these 16 regional water plans and put them together, and that forms the state water plan. We do it every 5 years, and it's a lookout for 50 years. So it's a very much an adaptive process. So as things change, water planning can change. The outcome of the water planning process, very simply, is where will our new state's water supply come from? A third will come from conservation and reuse. A third will come from new water supplies such as seawater desal, new wells, new reservoirs, and then a third will come from enhanced efficiency. So an example of an efficiency project is something that the Lower Colorado River Authority is doing right now. They're building an off-channel reservoir. They're borrowing the money from the board. And the way that works is if you are a water user downstream, you have to call for your water. And sometimes it takes up to 5 to 7 days for the water to flow to you. Well, if it rains in the meantime, the water just kind of flows on to the Gulf. So having an off-channel, to me it's more of an impoundment than a reservoir, but having an off-channel reservoir enables you to capture that water, and even capture water during flood conditions, pump it into the reservoir, and then be able to use it later, making the overall system much more efficient. So hopefully helping out the lake dwellers in terms of making a more consistent level of the lakes, which also provide environmental benefit, as well as the farmers and municipalities and users downstream. So an example of enhancing the overall efficiency of the system. And of course, the other thing you can kind of notice up here in terms of the cost is that, even though a third of the effort will come in the future supply from water conservation, it only represents 12% of the cost. So the kind of things that you're doing here are very cost effective and very meaningful as we move forward. Kind of the exciting thing for the Water Development Board, and this was made possible by you when you voted on the recent proposition to take the $2 billion from the Rainy Day Fund and move it into the State Water Implementation Fund of Texas. So as the board, we are, the State Safekeeping Trust is actually managing the fund. They are investing the fund, and then we are drawing down, or will this fall, a portion of this fund every year to do projects throughout Texas. When we did the planning and the development of the bill, of House Bill 4, they've done a snapshot across Texas, and they said, well, how much do we need in terms of be able to fund the future water projects that we need? And the answer was $53 billion. And we said, well, how much of that does the state need to help out with? And the answer came back $27 billion. So they actually said if we had $27 billion, they looked at a financial model, and they kind of backed into the $2 billion is what you needed up front to be able to fund $27 billion worth of water projects through a revolving loan program over the next 50 years. So our role as the board, and my role as a board member, is to make sure that we protect that purpose so that we're loaning out the $27 billion to accomplish the objective, but at the end of the 50-year period, we still have the $2 billion. So we're working very hard on that right now. Just to give you a quick glimpse of what the fund provides. And again, the whole idea behind SWIFT was to incentivize communities, particularly those with large projects, to do them now rather than waiting into the future when it's needed. I mean, think about it now and get moving forward with the process. What our financial model indicates that every year for the next 10 years, we'll be able to loan out about $800 million. We have several loan programs. One is just an interest, low interest. It's actually a subsidized interest. If you're looking to do a project, you won't get a better deal than from the Water Development Board because we have the full faith and lending of the state of Texas behind us. We're AAA bond rating. This is particularly important for small communities where they may not have such a good bond rating. But for SWIFT, of course, you have to be in the state water plan to qualify. You actually get an additional subsidy of 35%. Or if maybe you're doing a project where you're looking at a regional project and you don't have necessarily the customer base to begin with, well then there is a program where we will temporarily own the facility. It's called board participation, and then the community buys the facility back from us. And then we have another program where we actually can defer the principal and interest for periods up to 8 years. So many opportunities to be able to go out and get low interest financing, and the key here is that, come talk to us first, come talk to the board so we can help you through your financing. Just a real quick timeline for the SWIFT program. We've received 48 applications, requesting $5.5 billion. So our staff is literally going through the applications right now, kind of seeing make sure they all qualify. And then we will score them, and in the fall, then ask people to step forward. We'll invite them to participate and submit more comprehensive applications. We'll make the selection, go out for the bond sale, and actually close on the financing in the fall, and the communities will start moving forward with their projects. Just wanted to make you aware that we also have other funding programs. So just to kind of put it in perspective, we talked about $800 million a year for the next 10 years for the SWIFT. If you look at our other programs, which which are, we receive some funding through the federal government for drinking water state revolving fund projects, as well as clean water state revolving fund projects. These are drinking water, and these are sewage projects, mainly targeted towards those communities that don't have fresh water or they don't have sewer systems. They're still operating on septic systems. So money funds from the federal government through the Water Development Board, and we administer these programs. We also have, and these are long-standing programs, state programs, where we can loan out, again, low-interest funding, and then we have something called the Economically Distressed Areas Program, again, for communities that are very low income and in need of help to have fresh water or to have wastewater treatment systems. If you were to combine the existing programs and then compare that with what we're doing with SIRA, our existing programs we've funded since September of 2013, about $900 million. So we have a tremendous financial resource now to take the state water plan and actually put it into action, which is very exciting. The other thing that House Bill 4 did is that it took a fresh look at the Water Development Board, and we reorganized a number of things, one being the board director position. They formerly had been volunteer positions. Now we have 3 full-time board members. So there's myself, I serve in the engineering slot. Carlos Rubinstein, who is our chairman, he serves in the financial slot, and Beck Broom, who serves in the legal or business slot. In looking across the agency, we said, part of what we need to do, and we heard feedback from communities that it just takes a long time, a lot of bureaucratic red tape to get the funds kind of out there so we can get moving forward with these projects. So we split Texas up into teams. So before, if you had a planning question or a financial question or an engineering question, you have to try to track down the person within the board, and it was also almost a game of telephone. Now, every community in Texas has, if you will, their own project manager, and the list is up there. They have a whole team of folks, so they have their own planners, engineers, attorneys, financial advisors that can literally, either go to the community, or the community, if they want to make a trip to Austin, we'll put them all in the conference room, and they can sit down and kind of talk about their project. So from my standpoint, there's 2 values that the board brings. First of all, we have an amazing group of scientists and engineers and an amazing technical resource. And one of the ways that communities can save money is making sure you get that project scope right from the very beginning. So oftentimes our folks have seen the challenge before. We can give you different options, or even give you contacts to other communities who've done things so you can talk with them. So, if you need a pickup truck, you shouldn't build a Cadillac. And then you also want to make sure, particularly if you're a small community, that whatever you put in place is something that you can continue to operate. It doesn't have so many bells and whistles that it becomes an operating nightmare. So our staff can definitely help with that. And then while you're in there talking to us about the scope, we can set forth some financing options just to kind of get it, get the ball rolling. If at the end of the day you decide you want to go out in the open market and borrow the money, that's fine. You can still sit down and talk with us and help you get that work done and moving forward. We also just want to make sure you knew we have some field offices across the state. I'm a big believer in living, breathing people. So when you call and somebody answers the phone at the board, you can talk with that folks. If you have a question about, you think that I'm getting ready to drill a water well on my property, based on the data that the board has, do you think that there's water there? We have folks who are able to do that. We also have folks out in the field who we're going to move forward and do a little bit more than what they've done in the past. Before, they were basically inspectors that went around and looked at the projects that the board was doing, and we still continue to track those every step of the way, but now they're also available to go out and work with communities and do some of the scoping work that we talked about. Just want to let you know that all of our data is out online. We have active groundwater monitoring wells, and you can actually go out and click online and water data for Texas, and you can get the data yourself. Our state water plan is also out online, so we're trying to put everything that we do, make it available to the public so that you can not only, in this particular instance, see what's going on in your community, but you can see kind of like what your neighbors are up to. And of course, the hope is that folks will kind of come together and think more in terms of regional solutions. Of course, all that we're about is building projects for Texas. Here we're in Aldine and making available some, for the first time, for small community there, drinking water, and then a sewage treatment system. And then, we're up in Stratford, Texas, talking to the farmers about a program that they did called their 212 program. They all came together and from a water conservation standpoint said we ought to be able to grow 200 bushels of corn with 12 inches or less of irrigated water. They set that standard. They went out, purchased the technology, actually met their goal, they met their target, and now they are demonstrating it to other farmers and engaging others in making that information available. I think a lot of what is kind of needed from the agricultural sector is to let folks know that they've done really a great job in that industry in terms of coming together with efficiencies, and now an individual farmer can literally be 98% efficient in terms of utilizing their water supply. The challenge that remains is rolling this across the whole agricultural community. Farmers and agriculture does use a large percentage of what the water usage is in the state of Texas. Oftentimes, though, that water usage is in areas where there is not a high population, so it's not necessarily competing with residential or big city water use. The official figure is, because there are not numbers that are out there, it's about 9 million acre feet, and it's used on about 6 million irrigated acres across the state. Great job, I think, by the board and others in terms of reaching out to the agricultural community, and I kind of feel like it's incumbent on us to be able to tell their story, that they're doing a great job. It's important. When Tom and I were reporting, he was a rice farmer, he said, Kathleen, we make the perfect couple, because people have to have food and they have to have energy. And I think, agriculture is our mainstay. There are many advantages, particularly in economic development, to continue to have this sector. And I think it's incumbent on communities to think about, how can we continue to help agriculture to be sustainable, and thinking in maybe creative terms in terms of helping to develop water that will not only help cities, rural communities, but also agriculture as a whole. We've been traveling around the state, as I say, looking at projects and gathering folks, their thoughts and ideas. I'm a big believer that it's not one big answer, it's a lot of little answers. And guess what? The answers are not going to come out of Austin. They're going to come out of, folks around Texas who are out there every day, boots on the ground, doing what you do best, which is, creating jobs for Texas. The ending thought, and maybe the most important takeaway of all for me, is kind of what maybe your role is in our ask. We can have the money, we can have the technology, we talked about that. But at the end of the day, it's like it's a bottom-up process for planning, it's a bottom-up process for execution. So it's all about leadership, and it's the leadership of the folks that are represented here today in this room. You are powerful in terms of what you're able to do. This equation will not work without you. We can have the money, we can have the technology, but it's up to the local community to move forward, to ask the questions, are we prepared for tomorrow, and to start moving these projects forward. I'm a big believer in the messenger. You are powerful messengers because people trust you. I can say I'm from Austin and I have all the answers. I don't have any credibility, but people know you. They know the work that you've done. And so to the extent that you can help carry your message, to the extent you can go back to the groups and the organizations that you participate in, ask this question, make sure it's on the agenda, make sure you're moving forward to develop water for Texas, and make sure that your community has the projects they need for the future. That's the ask, and to the extent that there's anything that we can do to help in that regard, we are a resource for you. We exist for you. We do any type of research, it's targeted towards making sure we're developing that technology and that strategy that's economically viable for the future, to make sure we have our future water supplies. It's been a pleasure being here today. I will be here